All right, today I'm going to show you probably one of the best tricks that I have ever learned, and I hate to admit it, but I only learned it a couple of years ago, and it's based on a very simple principle. Most of you are familiar with a patterning bit and a router table. If you're not, it is just basically a straight blade with a bearing that's usually on the top or on the bottom. And if you take a pattern, something very simple like this, and you apply it to the top of the piece that you want to cut, then it runs along this bearing and doesn't let the wood that you're trying to cut go past that pattern, and you end up mimicking this pattern perfectly. So if you're doing like chair legs, you can get chair legs that are identical to each other on a unique shape like this that really has no reference points. So that's what a patterning bit is for. The tip and trick is applying the same principle to a table saw. So the same principle applies. You take a piece of wood, something like this. I've got a fairly substantial one that I clamp to my table saw, to this fence on the table saw, and then I position that so that it rides just over the top of the blade. That becomes the bearing, and then I can cut pieces. These are very simple ones, but this is a template that I've made for a box. And the reason that I use this is I often use veneer, and oftentimes when you put the veneer in the glue bag, it starts to move on you, and what you thought was square is no longer square. So I've created these square patterns, and I'm able to basically, without a straight edge or without a parallel edge, I can now run that along my bearing fence of my table saw, and I get a perfect cut every time. Now, I'm using a square, but this could be a curved surface, and I'm going to show you in a little bit another trick that I use on how to make the perfect miters. So let me set up and show you what I'm talking about on this fence. All right, let me show you how simple this really is. First thing that we're going to do is we are going to take the riving knife out, because if we don't, it tends to be in the way. Put that plate back in. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of wood that I just cut so that it fits a little bit better, and I'm going to make this my bearing surface. And you can use multiple ways to cut this. You want to make sure that whatever piece of wood fits underneath it. And then you get you some clamps. Basically clamp it to both ends of your fence. Like so. Okay, pull it up. Looks like I don't have that in there right. Alright, so let's say you've got your piece of wood, and I've got this one here that I've drawn my little marker tree on. Or let's just say that maybe I've wood burned this and I want a certain grain pattern on here. And I want to just cut to this line. So I've drawn the squares. This is the pattern that I'm going to be using for this. And I'm going to just basically put that pattern on and match it up exactly where I want to go. And then I've lowered my fence down so that it's just sitting above the piece that I'm cutting. And now I'm going to move my fence over, and I'm going to line it up exactly parallel with the blade. Now, when I run this through, a tip, if you're nervous about it, you can put a piece of sandpaper on the back of your pattern. You'll see that when I do this, it just rides smoothly up underneath there. So, I'm going to turn this on, I'm going to give it a cut. Now we have two parallel sides that match the pattern. Now here is where the pattern fence gets really interesting for me. It's in making beveled cuts, or mitered cuts, I should say. So what I've done is I've moved my saw stop fence to the other side of the blade. I set my blade at a 45-degree angle. I've had to use a different fence than the one I was using because I don't have enough room over there because of the sliding table. But what you do is you set the fence so that the workpiece itself becomes the bearing surface. And you make sure that it can't go past the fence, both on the input and output sides, and that you've got it set horizontal. You then make sure that the blade touches right at the corner. Now what's going to happen, because you're using the fence and the piece as the bearing surface, you're going to have probably about a 1/16 of an inch left over that's not going to be mitered. And that's okay, because you can sand that off or take care of it. But what's nice about this is the piece can never get destroyed because it can never move into the blade further than the fence allows it to move into the blade. And that is really nice and actually really safe. So when you're making a box, you cut your sides to the exact length you want the width to be on the outside. And then by doing this, you're actually cutting it right to size. Again, with that little 1/16 of an inch that I'll show you here in just a minute. So let's see how this works. I think I have everything set up again. Again, my fence is set up to the right height so that my input side and my output side are good. I'm not gonna accidentally slide under. I've got my blade at a 45-degree angle and just touching the tip of the bearing fence. And I should be able to just make a pass right through. So let's see how it goes. So in the end, it worked out really good. I have a really nice mitered edge here. And it doesn't really matter, you know, if you happen to pull away from the fence, it's not going to hurt you any because it can't go in further than the bearing fence is. So you're not going to mess up the piece of wood. You do need to be cautious because you've got the blade here and your finger could catch into it. So you want to stay far enough away. But this is what I like about it, as opposed to running it through with, you know, I never seem to get sled straight. And my cuts always come out wrong, but I've never failed getting a perfect 45-degree miter on this if I can tolerate the little 1/16 of an inch flatness that's still on here. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can, and I find this to be very, very handy. So again, this has been a couple of variations of the bearing fence, or what I call the bearing fence, pattern fence maybe is what they call it. And like I said, I keep finding ways to use it, and I really, really love it. So I hope this is something that helps you out as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time.